Welcome to Talent Magnet, brought to you by Pacific Mountain Workforce Development Council, the podcast where we help businesses become talent magnets by focusing on recruitment training and retention best practices. And now here's your host, Michelle Wynn.
So welcome to Talent Magnet. I'm Michelle Wynn, and we're here today with Jason Van Camp, Mission 60 Chairman and Executive Director of the nonprofit Warrior Rising. Welcome, Jason.
Thanks, Michelle. It's a pleasure to be here.
Yeah.
Real honor.
Well, it's really great to have you here. This is one of our very first episodes in a video format. And so I really appreciate you helping me break this in. Jason, you have so many roles in life. You are an author, you're an entrepreneur, a father and a husband, and a retired Army major where you served as a ranger, a Green Beret, and a detachment commander. I'm not sure which of one of those is the most challenging. They're not listed in order of importance or difficulty. Recently with COVID, things have changed a lot for your company and the way you deliver services. What's life been like for you in Mission 60? How have things changed and how are you doing?
Yeah, no, thanks for that question. Probably the most important role is husband and father. So I've got a 3-year-old daughter and a 1-year-old son, and they're fantastic. So everything was clicking at a pretty good rate prior to COVID. We did live keynotes, live workshops. We did custom programs, which amounted to corporate retreats and team building exercises and things like that. And things were going great. We had a number of clients on the docket this year, especially professional sports teams in the NFL and Major League Baseball. And then COVID hit, and all my contracts were canceled or postponed this year, which made it very, very difficult. And so we had a choice to make, die in place, weather out the storm, and just hope things will return back to normal, or do something about it, innovate, change, adapt, improvise, and overcome. And so we also have our book, Deliberate Discomfort, which is a #1 Amazon bestseller. We're trying to turn into a New York Times bestseller as well. And we have a masterclass program that we offer our clients, which takes all of the curriculum, all the training, all the material in the book, Deliberate Discomfort, and it translates it into a 66 video course. And it's been really well reviewed. So that's what we do now.
Well, that's great. And I've been listening to your book, Deliberate Discomfort,
Nice.
on Audible. You did a great job narrating it, by the way. It's not easy.
I did narrate it. It was harder than I thought. I thought, I can knock this out in about maybe 5 hours. It was a straight 2 weeks solid of narrating that. And it was hard, but it was fun. It was enjoyable.
Yeah. I bet there were a lot of takes, redos over and over.
Especially with my voice, there were a lot of, hey, didn't quite, I think you mumbled that a little bit. So we had to go back and back and back, but it was interesting.
Well, I wanted to talk to you today about what you learned during your military career with regards to all of your military training and your skills, and how that can really help people in business learn to be more resilient, to be more agile and more effective leaders. When you went through that training, you got out of the military, what was your light bulb moment to think about applying that to a corporate or a business setting?
The light bulb moment for me was, just a phrase I remember that my mother used to say when I was younger, was show me your friends and I'll show you your future. And I looked around at my friends, and then the majority of them were starting their own businesses, very successful. Some of them had already made a lot of money because they had gotten out of the military prior. And I thought, I should follow in their footsteps. I should start a business. And so I thought, what would I do if I were to start a business? And I remembered what I'm passionate about, what I'm knowledgeable about. And that kind of was the genesis of Mission 60. And it was a long journey, and we had no idea what we were doing in the very beginning, but we just kept putting one foot in front of the other until we finally found success.
I hear, I have a lot of friends in the military, and I hear that specifically Rangers and Green Berets, they are exceptional entrepreneurs. What are your thoughts on that? Since you talked about your friends, what is the nature of the work that really creates that skill set or mindset?
That's a great question. So the guys that are in the special operations community, guys that have been through more elite programs in the military, I think they understand what hard work really looks like. They understand determination, grit, perseverance, resourcefulness. And those are all the tools that you need in order to become successful in life, not just as an entrepreneur, but in life. And so I've applied those lessons learned to my businesses. Now, at the same time, to our detriment, there's always, not always, but usually there's a high level of pride and ego involved. You're like, you know what, I was a Navy SEAL, or I was a Delta Force guy, I was a Green Beret, and this should come easy for me. And it doesn't, because it's a different type of hard work, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Well, you've developed what you call the Total Warrior model. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yes, I would love to. So in the military, in the Special Forces selection and qualification course, we learned how they assessed individuals to determine whether or not they had the propensity to be successful as Special Forces soldiers and commanders. And I loved it. The psychological tests that we went through, the exams, the assessments, the peer-to-peer evaluations, the whole thing I thought was just fascinating, was just amazing. And I started looking into how they now try to predict whether or not an individual is going to be successful in the qualification course based on their background. And so I took that model and I kind of combined it with my own life experiences to create what we call the Total Warrior model, which is similar to something that you hear a lot about, the whole person concept. And so we have 6 different domains: mental, physical, spiritual, social, emotional, and professional. And so we evaluate our candidates, the people in our program, based upon those 6 domains. And we determine where you're at as a person, as a whole person, as a total warrior, based on that balance.
How is that assessment conducted? And can you give us an example of how this worked for one of your clients?
Sure. So I'll give you a couple of examples. One with the New York Jets, we were working with them, and they were our first ever client. And after we did one of our assessments, I talked to some of the players, and one of the guys I talked to was Matt Slauson. He was a left guard. He was an all-pro at the time. Fantastic person and player. And I just said, Matt, how's it going? What'd you think? What did you learn from our first assessment activity, which was an actionable activity, outdoors and so forth, physically demanding, required a lot of spur of the moment decision making and things like that. And Matt was like, man, I'm blown away. Like I knew you guys would bring it, but I didn't know you guys would go that far. And let me ask you this. He said, you see that guy across there's a dirt road. He said, you see the guy across the street? I said, yeah. And he said, that's Jeff Cumberland. I said, yeah. And he said, we've been on the same team for 4 years now. I'm a left guard. He's a tight end. I said, okay. And he said, we both play offense, And I was like, okay. And he's like, the first time I've ever said a word to Jeff was 5 minutes ago. And I was like, wow, and you guys virtually play right next to each other on offense for 4 years. And the first time you said a word to him was 5 minutes ago. Now, I just left a meeting earlier that day with the head coach and the coaching staff and the players, where they were very passionate about how they're a brotherhood, they're a family, and they fight for the person to their left and to their right. And this is what it's all about. And that's why they're going to win. And I said, well, Matt, like, how are you going to fight for the person to your left and to your right if you don't even know who that person is?
And it's interesting because in the military, there's a lot of camaraderie that's built in deliberate discomfort. You talked about how you were asked to go speak to a lot of different people on your team and kind of get to know them and get to know how they think. And we do that. I work for the Thurston County Chamber, and whenever we have new staff come on board, within the first couple of weeks, they set up meetings with everybody in the organization to sit down, get to know them a little bit, figure out what it is that they do. And in that, you learn a little bit about their personalities and their communication style. But not all organizations do that. We happen to be small. So the larger the organization, the more challenging that can be. And it sounds like maybe they didn't even do that with their team, right? But in the military, I think there's a level of trust that doesn't exist outside of that, that type of organization. You have to be able to trust each other to have one another's back, but you also understand that people, if they're in the same organization with you and in special forces, they've gone through assessments, they've achieved so much, that if they've made it there, they belong there. potentially, for the same reasons that you do. I've worked with a lot of people in the transitioning military community, and I help them figure out kind of what they want to do next in their careers, how to reframe their experience, how to repackage themselves, and then how to find that next role. And I often follow up with them a couple of years later, and I find that many of them are dissatisfied with corporate culture, and they tend to leave that environment either to start their own job or to go work maybe with something that has more purpose for them. They don't fit into an organization that doesn't have a shared mission, the sense of trust and camaraderie that they experienced in the military. So they tend to gravitate towards organizations that have that. Does your model help businesses to build this type of culture? How hard is it when you're training people in business that come from all different backgrounds, that don't come from like a shared doctrine or training?
Yeah. So the biggest difference in my experience between elite military units and businesses that we work with is shared culture. And that culture is built on trust. And there's not many people right now in a corporate America talking about trust. And so we try to establish a foundation for these businesses, bringing them back to an activity that we can do together, an actionable activity that we can do together, taking them outside of their comfort zone, taking them outside of the workplace, and then building a foundation of trust and communication. And that's really how it's built. It's through honest and clear communication. And once they understand that, we try to get them to push the limits every day, get outside of their comfort zone by doing several different things that we have, as part of our program. And that's a difficult thing to do if you are a part of an organization that doesn't want to rock the boat, get outside their comfort zone, change the status quo, do things differently, think differently, right? You have to understand that everybody's different. They think different, they speak different, they understand different. And the sooner you get to know them individually, the quicker you can build trust.
Yeah, that, I do all of this work in this podcast on behalf of Pack Mountain Workforce Development Council. And one of the things that we do is for a 5-county region here in Washington, Thurston, Lewis, Mason, Grace Harbor, Pacific, we help advise businesses. And this podcast is to really share best practices in recruitment, training, retention. Based on your Total Warrior model, how would you recommend that businesses even hire for some of these skills when we're bringing new managers into our organizations? Or, is it just that this approach needs to be adopted by the organization, and then you train your internal leadership, and then as new people come in, you onboard them in this mindset? Do certain people have this skill set? Can you identify it? Or is it just something that you have to adopt and train?
No, certainly there are many, many people that have the deliberate discomfort mindset already, that they just don't call it that. They live their life by those principles. But what we do is we establish a culture in a business. And once they have that deliberate discomfort mindset, that culture is established, everybody is trained. And so once we train the trainer, everything else kind of falls into place.
Yeah. You talk a lot about fear. I think a lot of people don't want to admit that they have fear over things. And I'd like for you to talk a little bit about fear, because I had some insights, especially when you talked about procrastination and how fear is tied to procrastination. It's not just putting things off. And, when I was younger, I procrastinated a lot more than I do now, but you really rang a bell for me when I heard you talk about the need to compartmentalize and to become objective about things. So can you tell me a little bit more about that?
Yeah, no, certainly. I appreciate all that positivity. So fear isn't something for you. So what you said, fear is something people want to avoid. I say, embrace that fear, be vulnerable with it. Understand that this is part of life. Everybody's afraid of something. And it's just an emotion, a natural human emotion. And so I feel like fear is what's stopping you from progressing, and I tell people that fear kills more dreams than failure ever will. And that phrase seems to really resonate with folks. And then I say, well, what are you afraid of then? You're afraid of the unknown? That's not entirely accurate, because fear is the unknown. And you're only afraid of what you don't know, what you don't see, what you don't understand. once you truly know something, once you understand something, you're no longer afraid of it. You know, I kind of use an example of playing sports, like growing up, like for example, in high school, just sports in general, playing sports. Um, you know, you before the game begins, you typically most people have butterflies. They're afraid. They don't know how the game's going to go. They don't know how they're going to play. They don't know what the atmosphere is going to be like or their opponents. But once they start playing, you know, once the game starts, once you're in the moment, you're no longer afraid. You know, you're just playing, right? And so I say it's not the obstacle that you fear, it's the unknown result of attempting to overcome that obstacle. And so I try to get people to have the courage to willingly, voluntarily, deliberately choose to confront that unknown or that fear, whatever it is, head on. You know, and compartmentalization, procrastination. Let's talk about procrastination first. So, you know, it's not the activity that you fear. Like I remember Dr. Sarah Spradlin on my team. She says, I hate, you know, folding laundry. I don't want to do it. And I procrastinate. Well, the actual act of folding laundry isn't what scares her. It's the feeling that she gets when she does that, the boredom, the monotony, just the negative emotions that she's had in the past of folding laundry. That's what she doesn't want to address. That's what she doesn't want to confront. But once she does confront that, she can get it done. And the quicker that you do that, the more successful you're going to be.
I'm glad I'm not the only one with that problem. Washing the clothes is fine. It's the folding and putting it away that takes days, right? Well,
Yeah.
you know, and it's interesting that you brought up team sports because so when I'm talking to service members, you know, they often think that they have to distill their entire military career into like their interview answers, their resume, and or even who they are as a person. And you know, I often teach them how to answer the "tell me a little bit about yourself" question. And one of my questions for them often is, "Did you play team sports?" And they're like, "Well, yeah, why?" And I said, "Because before you even went into the military, it framed who you are as a person. It helped you overcome your fear. It helped you understand how to communicate with others, how to be part of a team. You know, a team is only as strong as its weakest link, right? So you have to pull other people along with you. There's so much that you learn in team sports and even individual sports, but a lot of it is overcoming fear and being able to achieve something together. So I thought that was pretty cool that you went to that example because people don't think about themselves in those terms anymore. They think about, you know, the military career, but a candidate needs to understand that not everybody in the room in that interview is going to understand military. And especially the language of military is maybe something they can't identify with. So I appreciate that a lot. But I wanted to hit upon something else about stress.
Okay.
Because you've been through incredibly stressful situations.
Yes.
And I like your sign at your door, CYB.
Oh yeah. Check
Can you,
your baggage.
yeah, can you talk a little bit about stress in the work and managing that and then your CYB sign?
Yes. Yeah. So CYB sign is something I learned from playing college football at West Point because we had so many tasks and duties, responsibilities as a cadet, and it was very difficult. And so when you walk all the way up the mountain, essentially to the stadium and to the locker room, and a lot of guys just want to vent, you know, and complain, and you know, this, especially when you're a young guy. And there was a sign there that said CYB, check your baggage. So it's basically like, check your baggage at the door. You know, don't bring any of that crap inside, because we got to focus. We got to get our minds right. And so I took that CYB kind of slogan, that mentality, into my personal life, meaning I got married when I was older. I was 40 when I got married. I was 38 when I got married. I'm 43 now. So I've been married for 5 years. And what I noticed pretty quickly is, you know, whenever I wanted to vent or complain to my wife, not about her, but about business or about, you know, whatever, like I brought just such a negative atmosphere into the home, you know, and my wife would get into a bad mood, and then she would kind of inherently argue with me about something, you know, and it would just turn into an argument. And it was just a horrible, negative, dark, you know, environment that I created, this atmosphere. And so I remembered the CYB. So I put a sign on the door of my garage before I come home from work, to take a moment, to take a deep breath, to get my mind right, to check my baggage at the door. Because when I walk in the door to my house, like, I'm not bringing the negativity. I'm not bringing the frustrations, the complaints. I'm not bringing business into the home. I'm turning the phone off. I'm focusing on my wife. I'm focusing on my kids, and we're gonna be happy with that. And when I started doing that, I just saw such a profound change in my marriage and my family life. And I just think that's a powerful lesson, powerful tool to understand moving forward. In any organization, not just with your marriage or your family.
Yeah, it's such an important lesson. And I mean, if anyone even takes away one thing from today's episode, I hope it's that, because we are experiencing peak stress right now in so many areas of our lives. And so when I heard that, I just thought, oh, I need a little CYB sign on all my doors, even at my kitchen, my dining room table desk, so that when I'm leaving it, I remember, okay, I'm now leaving the workplace. I'm going to another part of my house, but now it's time to leave work and that stress behind. So it's really
that baggage, instead of being at the door to your house, now it's at the door to your home office, right?
For sure, for sure. Well, finding purpose after a military career, I think, is the most important thing. It's really hard to sell a widget and find purpose in that for a lot of people leaving the military. Maybe it fuels their competitive nature, but in the end, I think so many service members are looking for some meaningful work, something that fills their cup, where they're making a difference. Can you tell us a little bit about Warrior Rising and what ignited your passion for helping other entrepreneurs?
I'm a veteran, and I understand their concerns, their plights, their dilemmas, what they want out of life. And I feel like I can be a catalyst for change. I can really help out, and so I tried to. And like I said, it's soul enriching for me. And so I created a nonprofit in 2015 called Warrior Rising, and it helps veterans in the most altruistic way I know how. It helps them help themselves by creating or accelerating their own businesses. And we've been, like I said, around for 5 years. Last year alone, we helped 1,016 veterans start businesses. This year, we're going to have record number, maybe close to 2,000 veteran businesses helped. And we raised almost $1 million last year alone, which isn't crazy. I mean, we're not, the biggest nonprofit out there, but we do great work and we really help the veterans. And we've got a great team, and I'm really proud of this organization.
So I've already referred a couple people. I was in the commissary 2 weeks ago, and I ran into someone that I helped transition out of the military a couple of years ago, and asked him what he was doing, and he left his job, fulfillment issues. And I was like, well, what are you going to do next? And he wants to start a food truck. And I was like, okay, have you heard about Warrior Rising? And I had him look it up on his phone right then and there. And, any help that service members can get, because they have a vision, but they don't know how to get there. And so if they can have that guidance and have someone kind of, take them along the path, I think that's really helpful. So what do you offer? I mean, you're obviously not going to do the work for them, but what does Warrior Rising offer a veteran that wants to start a business?
So I love how you said that. And that's so critical for the veteran success, is understanding that we're not going to do the work for them. We're not giving away anything for free. We're helping them earn their own success, right? And so although it doesn't cost the veteran anything, we view ourselves as a tool to help them create or accelerate what they're trying to build. So success or failure is on their shoulders, right? And it's the same kind of mentality that we had in the military. We're not going to be there 24/7 for them. They have to figure a way out to be self-sustainable. So a veteran has a business idea. They apply on our website, warriorrising.org. We have an intake specialist within 2 days, reach out to this person and set up a phone call. And a phone call is usually 30 minutes to an hour, and they just talk. It's an intimate conversation about life, about business, about what they're trying to create, and so forth. Now, the intake specialist is not going to paint a very rosy picture for you. They're going to give you the reality. And as you talk about your business idea, if the business idea isn't viable, then they're going to tell you that, right? If the business idea is fantastic, they're going to tell you that. And the veteran goes through this 40 video curriculum. It translates the military operations order into a business plan. And it's on them to succeed or fail. They can ask questions, they get all the resources, information, but they have to do the work. And at the conclusion of the Warrior Academy, they have the makings of a business plan. The next phase for us is we introduce them to a mentor, and the mentor and the veteran together, one-on-one, they create a go-to-market strategy. The next phase that we have is a financial assistance phase, which in the past we gave every veteran money, but we've got so many veterans signing up now, we can't give every single person a grant. But in the past we did grants, investment opportunities, or loan opportunities. And so we give them opportunities now to earn the grants and loans and investments. And then finally, it's not just about helping veterans find their purpose again through business ownership. It's also about helping them find their community again. And so we have chapters, we call them platoons. And prior to COVID, we had 19 platoons, platoon locations. And now it's kind of been weird. We put a hold on everything, but it's sort of like an online community now. And we just want veterans to know that they can go somewhere where they feel comfortable, where they're safe, where they can talk about business, and they can get assistance and guidance and mentorship and so forth. And that's what we've created through the community at Warrior Rising.
And that's fantastic, because I'm sure the training is fabulous and it allows them to face their fears, right? And overcome the fears, because you're providing knowledge and assistance. But I hear very frequently that when service members leave the military, I mean, number one, they lose their sense of identity. You can't tell everything about them from 10 feet. You can no longer read their name on their uniform, their rank, see their badges, see what they've done. And so when they're stripped of that and then they move away from a military location, like I live here near Joint Base Lewis McChord, and we have a tremendous number of retirees and veterans that stay in the area because of comfort. They feel like they have a military community and it ties them to that way of life that they had for so many years. Even my father is 91. He's a Korean War vet. And I moved him here last year from the East Coast, and he's in a nursing home. It's assisted living that is 77% military. And he feels so good about being there because he thinks that people get him. It's just a way of life and a different way of thinking. So I would imagine that's probably been one of the most valuable pieces of Warrior Rising that you've created, is both the online and then the local platoons that really support people and connect them to a new version of a military community. Do you hear that a lot from everyone?
I think so. I think everyone is looking for their family again, that feeling that they got when they were in the military in certain units. Certainly not every unit felt like a family, but when they found their family, they really resonated with it. And I think that's what they're looking for post-military, is who are the people that I know or that I built trust with or have similar backgrounds that I have a shared culture with, that we talked about earlier, that I can feel comfortable around. And ultimately, like I teach in Mission 6.0, if you can start out with that feeling of comfort, that group, that community, and then expand from there, I think that's the most beneficial course of action that you can take.
Yeah. And for businesses that are listening today too, there are some companies that do a really great job of creating military affinity groups, so that if you are going to be recruiting veterans into your organization, consider creating a group where they have their own community, and it helps the onboarding process. It eases them into your culture. But, it gives them a little bit more of a sense of belonging, coming from a very different, like a military culture into a corporate culture. Amazon does it very, very well. I interviewed them last year for an episode on their military recruiting, and I think their efforts have made a real difference in bringing in veterans into their community. Well, Jason, is there anything that you'd like to add before we go, that businesses should understand about how to train their people so that they're able to retain them? Because recruiting is expensive, so it's much better to invest money into training so that you retain your people, so you don't have to keep up that recruiting cycle.
That's a great question, and I'll tell you this. So my business partner and one of my close friends, Nate Boyer, he's a Green Beret. He walked on to the University of Texas as a true freshman, 29 years old, never played football a day before in his life. And I went to see him his freshman year. He was 30 years old at the time, right? And he played in the game against Oklahoma State. And after the game was over, I was talking with him in the locker room, and I was giving him a hard time, and I was telling him, hey, Texas went to the national championship last year. You guys were, lost one game this year. Nate Boyer comes to town, and you guys are 4-6, just being a good friend to him, right? And he said, Jason, it's crazy. We have literally the same team we had last year, minus the starting quarterback, an offensive lineman or two, and we're a 4-6 football team. I said, well, what's the difference? He said, you know what? I've been around. I'm a Green Beret. I've been to combat. And I'll tell you, the difference is leadership. We don't have it this year. We don't have leadership. And I said, why don't you step up and be the leader then? He said, well, I'm a true freshman, walk-on player that's never played football before a day in his life. I'm going to have to earn my spot to be called the leader. And we realized at that moment that that's the difference, the true difference between winning and losing. It's leadership. And it's the quality of leaders that you have on your team. And that's what Mission 6-0 does. It develops your leaders from the inside out.
Well, I think that summarizes everything and wraps it up really well. So I can't thank you enough, Jason, for joining us today. I hope everyone will take a moment to check out Deliberate Discomfort. I know that you were giving away copies on your website for free recently, a limited number, but you just have to cover shipping, but also it's available on Audible, and you did a fantastic job narrating it. So thank you.
Very kind of you to say that. Thanks for having me on, Michelle. Appreciate it. It's been a lot of fun.
Yeah.
You've been listening to Talent Magnet, brought to you by Pacific Mountain Workforce Development Council in partnership with the Thurston County Chamber. If you've enjoyed the episode, please subscribe to the podcast and also leave us a rating and review. Thank you so much for listening, and we'll be back soon with a new episode.